Hello, everybody, and welcome to Here's Why. Uh, Tonight, I am having a really important conversation with some really cool people. I just want to make sure that everyone is here and that y'all can see this, because sometimes these get a little confusing for me. So, all right. So it looks like most everybody is here. I am going to go ahead and bring everyone on stage. I am joined tonight by some really amazing people to have what I think is a really important conversation, especially given the news that is coming out this week, which we will talk about. So please help me welcome Devin Norell, Charlie Adams, Caden Coleman, E.C. Pizarro III, and Miguel Pena. Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. Hello.
Oh, I'm here. Hey.
Hi. So we are short two folks for now, and hopefully they'll join us in a second. I know Devin Norell will be on in a second. But how are we? As
Doing
good as
great.
can be, I'm assuming, right?
There's a lot of crazy
Um,
stuff happening right now, but we're here.
there's a lot going on. So as you folks can see from the title of this video, I wanted to talk about trans men and trans masc identities and sort of how I think, in my opinion, as someone who is an ally to the trans community and a part of the LGBTQ plus community, I feel like we don't really hear a lot from trans men and trans masc people. And given the news that we've unfortunately dealt with this week, this conversation is actually coming at a really sensitive time, I think. And I just want to say, for me in particular, before we start, the reason why I think these conversations are so important is I often, unfortunately, have to cover online different examples of trans people experiencing harm, experiencing fatal violence. And I realize that stories like the story of TK Hill, who was murdered in 2024, those stories don't get the same amount of attention for some reason. And this week, unfortunately, there was yet another example of this kind of violence. A 24-year-old trans man named Sam Nordquist from Minnesota was found dead in upstate New York. He had been staying there since September with someone who he was in a romantic relationship with, and police later investigated and found out that he had been tortured by that person and their family for a while, at least over a month from what initial reports have told us. So that is very upsetting. I was hoping we didn't have to start on such a heavy note, but how are you folks feeling?
Oh boy, who wants to go first?
I mean, I feel like it's loaded. I can just speak for myself as a man who has met a lot of my partners on the internet and have had long distance relationships and traveled to meet people. It's a little jarring that that could happen. I even went on Sam's TikTok and it gave Sam love this person, right? And it's just really messed up when all Sam wanted was to be loved, and he should be here.
Yeah.
He should be here.
I wish that they wouldn't have ruled it out as a hate crime so fast. It seemed very quick to me, and I just don't see how they could get all the information they needed so quickly.
To be fair, from the reporting that I've done and from what I've read, it has not been ruled a hate crime yet, but it hasn't been ruled out. I think there are certain factors that they have to confirm in order to rule something, a hate crime. Miguel, how are you feeling?
Oh god. Sorry, that's a loaded question. It's just I feel like it gets overwhelming to constantly be bombarded with more news about people in the community and how many people we've lost. Which I guess kind of goes with the topic of this conversation, is that it's really disappointing to see, like, okay, in part it's I'm happy that we're getting recognized, right? But then at the same time, it sucks that every time we see something covering any sort of trans person, it's always the most unfortunate, violent, terrible things happening to us. And so it's either we engage in this discourse about how we are being targeted disproportionately, or about how we're being unalived all the time. But there's never enough room for like celebration or joy. Like I don't know, it gets really tiring, especially as like a younger trans guy, to see like, oh, this is what my life expectancy is supposed to be. And I don't mean to be, dramatic or assume the worst or anything like that, but it is disheartening to think, oh, that's what my legacy is going to become. Like that's what it could become.
Yeah.
I don't want to make jokes about it, but it's just like, oh, okay, there we go. This is what I see when I see trans man in the news.
And I just want to reiterate again, and Devin, Norell, and Caden, thank you for joining us. I just want to point out, like I said at the top, like this wasn't even supposed to be what the conversation was about.
Yeah.
I reached out to all of you days ago, so it's really unfortunate. But Devin, Norell, how do you think this story is being covered? Is it being covered adequately?
I haven't fully parsed through everything. It's been a little difficult to read through it just because of the details that I've had. It's just so cruel. It's so incredibly cruel. Having worked at like Teen Vogue and them and Out Magazine, and having had covered this stuff when I was working there, it's a double-edged sword because no one is going to accurately cover these stories in the way that we did. We being other trans people. But then it's like, crap, I have to write about another death, right? So with that said, some of the things I first noticed was love that they being some of the outlets actually gendered him correctly. But then it was, man killed by 5 people, and then the erasure of his transness. Then there was also the element of no one is talking about the, to me, very obvious part of these are a bunch of white people who attacked one Black trans man, and how that plays into it. Because we have to, at the end of the day, we have to remember that sometimes oppressed people can continue to oppress other people. We all have our privileges and we all have our levels of being oppressed. And just because we are oppressed people doesn't mean that we can't cause harm to another person. And they really cause a lot of harm. And then there's the level of, what fault does media play into this? We say all the time that we need Black stories, we need trans stories, we need trans masc stories, trans feminine stories in order to humanize us. But then we have folks writing about what Cheeto is calling us, and that plays into the rise of violence against us in our bodies.
Yeah, and I want to ask a question to the room. You mentioned Sam being properly gendered in publications about what happened to him, but then also his transness also being erased. So what is the balance there? What is the balance in covering stories of trans people, trans masc folks, and sort of when these circumstances come up,
I mean, the easiest way to address that really is just say, hey, this is a person of trans experience, right? That's the least you can do. The most you can do is mention that, and then also mention the rate of the stats, because there's stats everywhere these days. You cannot ignore the stats of violence that trans people experience. Maybe double down by adding a stat about the violence that a trans masculine person is vulnerable to. And then also, again, just mentioning what's happening in media and the fact that trans people are being attacked and targeted left and right, not just by our states, but now by our actual government, and acknowledge that that's happening and how it could have played into what took place in upstate New York and the fact that this took place in New York.
Right. Kaden, how do you feel about the way that people have engaged with this story online? Because I know you shared it. I know we've all shared it and engaged with the story. But what do you see online in regard to what's happened to Sam and how people are commenting or talking about it?
Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of people just flabbergasted, I guess. I will say that, as crazy as it is, the first thing I did notice was, oh my God, they mentioned that this is a trans man. Like, cool. But also I was like, damn, this is like the first time I've seen in my 17 years of transitioning somebody. I know there's been other trans men who have been murdered. Some of them have been my friends. And we've always had to fight for them to gender them correctly. But I can't help but to think that with the political climate, there's the reason why that gendering was correct in this space. And I've seen a lot of people just really taken aback by it. Intercommunity, however, there has been a community. There has been a lot of like discourse in the Black trans community. I can't speak for any other spaces. That's the space that I navigate every day. And there's been a lot of conversation between trans men, trans masculine people, and then everyone else in the LGBTQIA plus community, because there has been a resounding silence. And like, I know for me, I shared that story either yesterday or the day before that. And we're just now, because there's so many trans men like, nah, fuck this. Why are y'all so quiet? Everybody wants to try a trans man, have sex with a trans man, impregnate a trans man, fetishize a trans man, have trans men be the butt of the jokes. But when somebody is literally tortured and murdered, everybody's silent. And now we're finally speaking out about it. And people are like, oh, trans men, we see you. Do you? Or do you see us complaining? So
Do you think, I'm sorry to cut you off. Do you think that this story, because I mentioned before, Chevy Hill, but there have been plenty of trans men and people of trans experience who have suffered fatal violence. Do you think that this story specifically is getting the attention it's getting because of the kind of violence that it was, the way that it's being described? Investigators say this is the most horrific crime they've ever investigated in New York. So do you think that it takes it being this level of harm?
Yes, and also the layers of, I don't think anything is done without purpose. I'm sorry, and I've never been like a conspiracy theorist or anything, but the way that things go these days, the more you, the unfortunate truth is, the more you're educated, the more you start peeling back layers, the more you start seeing shit for what it really is, right? And I think that, yes, it is because it was a horrific crime, so much so that, much like Devin Norell, I haven't had much time to, not time, wherewithal to take the time. I cannot with the details. Like, I'm tired already. I'm exhausted, but the fact that there were other people from within the community that took place or took part, I'm sorry, in the torturing and murdering of this person, it gives people a chance to shine a light on the fact See, it's not just cis straight people against trans people. It's this, and I'm hearing that now because there was a lesbian involved, and somebody jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, that it's not really being seen as a hate crime, as if I'm not going to get into it too much, but I'm thinking that it's not without purpose, because I have a feeling there's going to be some sort of spin as this gains traction. So I do think it has to do with the fact, I mean, that's absolutely insane that I always just try to sit and think about like what that man had to have been going through mentally. Whew. And that's why it's too close to home for me. That being said, there has to be a reason for that. But I also just feel like when it comes to trans men and trans people in general, they love trauma porn when it comes to us. So look at this horrible thing that happened to this trans person. Oh my gosh. Tears, sorrows, prayers, sorrows. That's what it comes off as to me.
Yeah. So I don't want to move on from this too quickly, but I also don't want to keep all of you too long. So I want to say again, thank you for joining me to have this conversation. What in general should we do all of the time to make sure that the voices of trans men and trans masc folks are included? Where do we not see people like you?
I would say it could start as simple with vocabulary. When community says trans people, they're not talking about us. They will have a trans community panel, and it'll be all trans femmes, trans women, assigned male at birth, non-binary folks, but it will not be us.
So and if there are us, there's like one of us.
But I've seen too many times where it's not even one of us, where it's bold enough to say a trans community conversation, and it's a bunch of the girls.
Mm-hmm. No, really.
Like when we're talking about trans men, call a thing a thing. When we're talking about trans masculine individuals, call a thing a thing. Don't all of a sudden now it's trans people. No, because when you say trans people, you mean the girls. When you say trans community, you mean the girls. You're not talking about us.
And that shows up in when you're so on my platform, most of my supporters, because I've been pregnant, are cis women, cis heterosexual women who have also been pregnant and just happened to come across my story, and I resonated with them or whatever the case may be. Before coming across me, when they heard trans, how a trans, I seen a trans the other day. They're always talking about trans women. And so I'm always like, a trans what? And they're like, what do you mean? Because they see trans people as, like was just said, they see trans people as trans women, and then trans men, we are literally treated as though we are a species of our own. We're not part of the trans community. We're not part of the LGBTQIA community. We're just out here.
Do you think, and I'm going to ask Miguel, this question's for you. Do you think that this sort of leaving trans masc folks and trans men out of conversations and out of these rooms, do you think that there's an insensitivity towards trans men that has to do with society's idea of masculinity? That's my thesis, but I'm not sure what your feelings are about it.
Sorry, one more time. What do you mean by insensitivity?
I often feel like, in general, even when it comes to cis men, society doesn't really empathize or sympathize with the plight of masculinity in general.
Okay.
So I'm asking, do you think that that is connected to why, for example, trans men are left out of conversations, or their stories don't get as much coverage? It could be no. It could
be a loaded question. That's a loaded question. I'm just trying to think about what angle to go through, or like where to go from, because I can only really speak on from like what I've seen on my platform, for example. And I love what you were saying, Kaden, about not really being treated like we're a part of any community, at least for what I've noticed. And again, I started transitioning a couple years ago on my platform. I went like documented the whole thing. And what I noticed, because I had a pretty big following before my transition, was that the minute I started getting more and more masculine it was like the less people I think could relate to me, and suddenly it was like their ideas of masculinity were projected onto me, or what I should be, or what I had to be. And then the girls and the gays and the theys were like, well, I can't relate to you anymore. Now you're just a man. The more I pass, the more I feel like it comes down to, well, you're just like any other cis man, except when it's convenient for them, for me to not be just like a cis man. So it's like, you're a man, so fuck all men, which valid. I get why, but also, no, there's exceptions though. Like I would go gay for you or straight for you or like whatever that means. So unless I'm being fetishized, it's like, well, you're not quite this anymore, but you're not exactly that. And I don't know what you are. So I don't know how to treat you, and I don't know how to talk to you, and I don't know how to relate to you like a human anymore, because now you're just this weird concept in my head. And so, yeah, I guess I've also only really found community even in within other trans mask folks. But I don't know. It's like it's even trying to talk about it, I confuse myself, because it's like you end up feeling excluded in every space, and even in the trans mask space at times, because intersectionality, and that's like a whole other conversation. But
I'm gonna jump in and
Can I add? Oh, go ahead, Kaden.
Oh, I'm sorry. We were both sorry. I think that a lot of us, and I just nod if you can agree, that there is this strange ass space of, your question is valid, right? So the answer is no. It's not because of this idea of masculinity why they're not talking about it. They don't talk about it because to them we're just women. And they don't talk about women. We don't matter. We're just lumped in with the women, except for that we're not, which is why I jumped in after Miguel, because we're in this limbo space of like, you're a woman, but no, you're not. You're not a woman. You're taking away from women, but actually you're not a man either, but you're just a man, but you're not a man. But why aren't you man enough? But wait, you're supposed to act like this. Why are you dating people like that? Who are you? So you haven't said, wait a minute. Genitals. That's how it goes. That's the conversation. So there's like this strange space of like, we're just not included because we're not considered, because we don't exist. We're just like under this radar of non-existence, unless there's trauma porn or like something that they can get their rocks off to. Oh my God.
Genitals, yeah.
Oh my God. So the trans woman, so it's just straight with extra steps, right? Like it has to be that for us to gain any form of relevancy, or they have to want to have sex with us.
I want to also add, Kaden, and to Miguel's point, that there's also this thing of like, we don't exist and we're not there, but we be in the space the whole time. So as you get more masculine, if your mannerisms are more masculine, they deem you as somebody's trade in the LGBT space. If you're more feminine, they're like, oh, so you're just a gay boy, not realizing like, yes, that may be a gay boy, but that is also a gay trans man. So there's no question of, and then it's also the community will say that now that we pass, we inherently gotten so much privilege, and not to say there isn't privilege that we receive, but there's also a level of isolation that we receive from within our own community.
Charlie, question.
But we forgot that Devin was trying to speak when I was trying to speak, and we just kind of.
Oh, I mean, y'all pretty. Is my mic off? Yes. Okay. Sorry, my computer's moving very slowly. Y'all pretty much covered it. What I was going to mention is, what I hadn't heard yet is transmisogyny. But y'all pretty much explained and covered all of that. The same transmisogyny that trans women face, we face too, whether it be us being fetishized for our genitals. But to what Miguel just attested to, it's the same reason why we cannot enter shelters for victims of sexual violence, because we are masculine, or we're viewed as men and or are men. I'm non-binary, so I say view as men for myself. it is also why we can't have access to the, well, Kaden, I don't know what your experience is, but I know a lot of people have not been able to have access to things like pregnancy care, abortion care. I think about the fact that there have been people in New York that were diagnosed with late stage terminal cancer and did not know it because the doctor found out that they were trans and didn't tell them. This is all transmisogyny.
My God.
You know,
Yeah,
so like it's, we've all named it, but that's the, you've all touched on it, but that's the name of it. That's why we are, you know, when people say, oh, you know, you can pass so you blend in, no, that's not how it works. Let me explain transmisogyny to you. Then they're like, oh wow, I never really thought about that. It's like when someone in the Midwest goes to get their tea from the pharmacy and you're just kind of like, are you sure you need this? You know, just if you're just starting your transition, that's transmisogyny.
Yeah, just to like add, just because we talked about my experience, the reason why I was able to navigate those spaces is because I'm not afraid to walk in and say, hey, y'all, I have a coochie, so I need to be here, right? So they, you know, I don't care about none of that. Do what you need to do to get this baby up out of me or whatever we got to do. And when I leave here, you know, I'll worry about everything else.
But even then, Kaden, there are people as loud as you. Look at the most recent iteration of I forget, it's Beyond the Aggressives, and one of the folks that they follow can't even find an OBGYN here in New York or in Vegas where they were, and that's across the nation.
And yeah, I was going to talk about that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was going to, yeah, no, you're fine. I did have a hard time finding an OBGYN when I was pregnant both times. It was very difficult. And I was going to say the only reason why I don't have those problems now and why I'm able to live in somewhere like Texas is because of my platform and my access to doulas. And I can skip all that and just go to where, but everyone else has to come to me so that I can go look for them because of we just don't, like, you would think with all this conversation about transness and how the whole world hates trans people, right? Currently, we so much so that they voted the orange fucktard into the office, but they still, everybody still acts like they've never heard of a trans man before.
Right. So Charlie, you have 3 months or so left until you become a doctor, right? That's I'm right. So what does the trans community benefit from having people of the trans experience in the medical industry, in the medical field? I know that that's a lot, but what are some specifics that you think come to mind?
Oh my goodness, it's so hard to choose like one thing because somebody mentioned earlier that like nobody can really report on us like we can, and it's so similar in medicine too. Like there's so many little things that happen all the time, like from registering for medical organizations, registering for medical school, even just applying, all the way through to like graduation and training and onward. So many little things that like we as trans medical students bring up that like, hey, this is not like trans inclusive, like you can't do this to students or patients, and no one's ever thought of it. No one's ever spoken about it before. They're completely unaware. So, I mean, honestly, that's why my life goal is to get as many trans people in medicine to become physicians as possible. And we need a lot more people who don't just look like me doing it. We need like diverse trans people doing it, because that's the only way we're going to be able to address all these issues in like the most correct way, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I feel really strongly about that.
I'm going to jump in a lot because I talk a lot. So just shut me up if I need to. But I do, to just piggyback off of that, I can attest to that, because though I tend to focus more on perinatal and reproductive justice, I have given speeches and talks and trainings at different medical students. And just the little bit that I've given them, they were like, oh my God, I never considered this. And doctors that have come to my trainings have said when they went to medical school, their extent of LGBT training was like a chapter in a book that lasted a day, and they never mentioned anyone in the community ever again and how to properly care for them. So I say all that to say the idea of having trans people as our physicians is amazing. However, I want to just point out, and I'm going to do it every chance I get, my doctor who missed my pregnancy with my first pregnancy was a trans man. And so there has to be, it's not just enough to be trans, like you have to also want to, navigate that space as a trans man and actually provide the proper care for trans men. Because if I come in and tell you that I'm gaining weight and there are things happening, why didn't you give me a pregnancy test? You know, I got a coochie, sir. Like, I'm confused. You know what I mean? So it's just like, it makes me excited. And I just love to hear that there's even the conversation being had that you can't do these things. You have to do these things, because if you're just navigating through medical school as a man, you're not really helping anyone. And I'm sorry, that's just the truth.
No, I want to jump on that, because that's spot on. Like we all come from different walks of life, and we all have different ideas of what our goals are. And Kaden, you make such an excellent point, because that person probably was just like, well, I transitioned to be a man, so why the hell do I want to get pregnant? Like sometimes you have to be reminded that not every trans man is the same kind of person. And so, this is one of my new part-time jobs, right? Like I'm training all the clinics across New York State for this, and you would be surprised. It's like night and day when it's an all trans staff, as opposed to when it's like maybe 2 or 3 trans people on staff, and then there's a bunch of cis people. But like even then, there are trans people that literally will say, "Oh dang, I never thought of that." Especially if it's like a trans woman trying to take care of a trans man, or vice versa. Oh wow, I've never thought of that. But you would be surprised how even within and amongst our own sub communities, if I may, dang, I've never really thought about that. Wow. Oh yeah. Okay, you're gaining weight. Wow, I would have never stopped to think that maybe you were pregnant. I'm thinking maybe you just took too much tea this week, because we know that tea makes us gain weight. Unfortunately, I can attest to that. Or it could fuck up it could cause diabetes, right? And so we think about all these other things. We have to remember that we have certain bits and parts, and not everybody wants bottom surgery. Not everyone wants to get pregnant, and they too still have to be trained.
Right.
So I just want to say really quick, because I promised you guys I wouldn't hold you long. Can we go 5 more minutes before we wrap this up? Is that okay?
Sure.
Yes. No pressure if anyone has to check out. I just want to. So EC, I had a question for you. So I know you have experience working in tech, and we are watching as the letters T and Q are removed, where it's LGB apparently, and we're watching the way that every platform, even the one we are on right now, is now beholden to Donald Trump. What impact do trans people have by being in tech? Because again, my whole thing is like, where can trans men be more included? So like, what's your experience in tech been, and what's the impact of trans people in tech?
The impact that trans people can have in tech is that if we're building the tech, we own the tech. And that's what we saw with the whole like turning of TikTok off, right? They had the power to do that. And for 12 hours, they really broke the law, because nobody in the United States had access to their profiles, but their profiles were still live. So from a data trust standpoint, like there were a bunch of things that were like extremely wrong with that.
Broke the law?
Because from a standpoint of like ethics in the internet, you sign up for your account, which means you have access to that account unless you break their privacy policy or break their rules on their platform, and then they have the right to revoke it. By the rules of what happened at that time, not everybody in the United States broke the privacy policy of TikTok for their account, for them to lose access to their account.
Right.
And when accounts get banned from TikTok, the account is deleted. So your content's not up there. You're not getting messages. There's no chance of you getting hacked, any of that stuff. With you not having access to your account, all of that is now off the board.
Gotcha.
So the impact trans people have in tech is we can own our own tech. Everything is through technology now. I went through Sam's TikTok. Like, he met his girlfriend on the internet. People meet folks on the internet. Trans people move a lot. They find community on the internet. The impact that we can have in tech is if we're owning the tech, building the tech, like with everything else, we know what's safer for trans people.
I had never considered that risk.
The internet at this point. Like, I wouldn't even be here had it not have been for the community I've built on the internet.
I met Kaden on the internet 20 years ago.
20
years ago, I met Kaden on the internet.
I was 1 year old at the time.
Kaden, I met you at a house party.
I met Devin Norell at a house party in North Philly.
Can I jump in with that tech? I mean, this is everything that y'all are saying about healthcare, tech, even journalism, is just further proof of why I hate to call it DE&I, but why we need DE&I, right? So if you can see this background here, right? I host a show on PBS called Brave Spaces. On episode 4, the first thing I talk about the episode is about lesbians who tech, and the first thing I talk about is this show that was crowdsourced from a bunch of tech bros, specifically white tech bros. And it was supposed to be a recreation of Seinfeld. And it was taken off, I think, within the second or third episode, because the show immediately became transphobic. And it's like, okay, but why is it transphobic? Who are the people coding the fucking show? Oh, a bunch of cis white men. And so it's scouring all the things that not just what they're coding, but what these specific people were saying on the internet and bringing it into the show. So if you are generating your information from a bunch of white bros, cis bros that are homophobic, transphobic, racist, and all the other things, what do you think the show is gonna have on automatically generate? So if you have EC, for example, coding, and a bunch of other people like EC, and a bunch of other people that look like us, that could have been avoided in that show.
Yeah. And I've talked to someone before, and I think I've talked on my channel before about how AI is also racist because the people who build it are also racist. And
There's
there was
implicit bias in all
there was a point, I think either early last year or late 2023, where someone did an experiment either on YouTube or TikTok, and they went into like different chatbots and asked it to write them a poem. And the prompt was, I'm a Black, like 17-year-old girl, and I need to write a poem about my family. Please write me that poem. And the poem was like, I don't have a father, but regardless, like I was like, that is insane. That is nuts.
That's an extreme version of like when you go into the bathroom and you put your hand underneath the sink and the water doesn't come on.
Oh my God, that just happened to me the other damn day. And I'm sitting there like,
happens because the people that built the sensor only tested against white skin.
Right.
What?
Mm-hmm.
That is why. Like, and this is why I'm so like, nah, we need to be in tech because tech is in everything. And everything is tech. So just that something is just that small as going to the bathroom. We know a lot of y'all don't wash your hands.
Hello.
So maybe everybody doesn't know this analogy.
My least favorite thing about the men's bathroom is that. Exactly.
Like you gotta shake your hand 4 or 5 times.
I don't want to see y'all.
That's why you fist bump.
Miguel, I had a question for you. There is a lot of conversation about, you're the youngest person in the room. So there's a lot of conversation about your generation being the most accepting and the queerest generation yet, statistically, that we've seen.
Mm-hmm.
From the things that you've read and seen online, do you think that there is more room for acceptance, and I don't want to use the word tolerance, acceptance for trans folks in your generation versus earlier ones?
Absolutely. I think, okay, and I don't know, I don't have stats to back me up on this, but I think the reason that we're considered the gayest generation or whatever is because now we have way more exposure than generations before. So now, who are you pulling from? Where's your data coming from? That's all across the globe, right? Like, if you're getting your numbers from people who are sharing their experiences, there's way more of us sharing our experiences. However, if you go into a classroom, back where I'm from in Florida, and I'm, talking to people my age, half of them are still not nearly as accepting. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we don't get educated on any other experience that isn't a cis white male experience. So yes, we are more accepting in the sense of, there's way more gay people, and I feel a lot more comfortable around my generation than I would, maybe some older people. But I don't think the general consensus is really, oh yeah, like Gen Z is more accepting. Like we still have our chads and our frat boys who are gonna hate chromos. Like it's still dangerous as hell to walk around, even a college campus, or to engage with people online. Like people are still insane. And I think a lot of it honestly just has to do with a lack of education. And now this like anti-trans rhetoric that is worse than ever. But there's a lot of room for improvement.
Did anyone in this room not document part of their transition online? EC, would you?
I was stealth for a decade.
Oh dang.
So I went from low disclosure to more visible about 3 years ago. So my journey is I transitioned, went directly into corporate America. And if we were friends before, you knew, but it wasn't a thing of like knowing. I didn't do the video, none of that. I was just a guy on the internet. And if you knew I was trans, you knew I was trans. If you didn't, you didn't. So I did not document my
I mean, obviously, so much goes into that decision to be stealth, right? It's geographical, it's time, it's lived experience. But would you, if you could, if you were Miguel's age now and you were transitioning, or if you were the same age, if you had the access to social media and stuff, do you think that you would be someone who would document it?
No.
No.
I had the access. A lot of my friends, I saw Caden document his. I saw Devin Norell document theirs. A lot of my homies, I saw them document it.
Okay.
For me, I also saw that documentation, there were a lot of sacrifices they made. I was able to make a man of my own design without any critique of anyone else because I didn't leave it for public consumption. The man that I became was for me because I said I already sacrificed enough. This isn't for public consumption. I'm going to work on me, do me, and you can take whatever I give you, but you're not going to get all of me. And that was just a personal decision that I made. And I don't judge anybody else for their decisions that they made, but that was my decision. And I was able to impact the folks that I could. I was still able to mentor a lot of young guys, but it was you had to know. If you knew, you knew. And I was there as a resource. But for me, it was better for me to just build my man of my own design where I can be a queer man and it looked the way I want it to look and not the way everybody else expects it to look.
Gotcha. Well, you see, I think you still play such can in the future play such a huge role because as I'm just remembering again, I think I told you this recently, and I'm listening to Miguel, right, and thinking about the fact that at any point our hormones can be taken away from us. Mm-hmm. And I met you at this girl I was talking to house years ago, again in college, and I think at the time you might have been getting the moans off of like the black market. And we might have to do that again. And that's like, we might have to reach out to the folks that knew how to do that before it was okay for us, or before we had an avenue to get it legally and through our doctors and get it covered without us having to spend $1 gazillion to get our moans.
I just want to say real quick about the question that you asked Miguel. I think that I feel like I can weigh in on this as a transparent of an 11-year-old. So she's a preteen, a tween. And, there's so many people from my generation and even like Miguel's generation that are like, oh my God, those poor kids, they're just going to be so confused. Meanwhile, these kids are gay, they're trans, they're non-binary. They don't understand the hoopla. They don't get why everybody's so confused. They're like, okay, wait, so what are their pronouns? Okay. They do not care. And it's such a strange thing to see as somebody who started transitioning. I don't know if I'm I think I want to just point out that I think EC is older than me, but I think I've been transitioning longer.
Wow.
Wow. Same time. Y'all were definitely at the same time.
No, I was a little. No, I was a little bit before EC, because EC came to me and told me that he was transitioning, and I was like, I knew it, child, I knew it. But anyway,
I met y'all in the same year, literally months apart. That's why I feel like y'all are at the same time.
Because we were both. Anyway, that's off there. But the fact that like for us growing up, being even a masculine presenting woman was enough for you to get bullied, right? And then there's probably I'm assuming, this isn't my lived experience, but even for Miguel's generation, even though that you start seeing trans teens will able to start transitioning a little sooner, there's still a lot of bullying. Now you are getting bullied if you're not inclusive and not the other way around. So why you got a problem with trans people? That's weird. What the Sigma? Is that what they say? Sigma? What the Sigma?
I think that's why they have a problem, is because they can't discriminate against us. They're mad that people are mad at them for being assholes. That's really what the issue is.
Yeah.
So I mean, I agree. I mean, my son is 12, and I've had conversations with folks who have asked me like, did you explain to your son that you're gay, or like, how did you ever talk to your son about that? I was like, I didn't. He's my kid. His entire existence, whatever he sees, has just been normalized. Which I mean can be bad, because that's also how people normalize like abuse and like bad things. Yes. But my son just, I was.
You know what it is though? They think that every day we wake up and say, "Hey,
happy Pride.
I just want you to know I have a vagina. I haven't taken my T-shot today. Transgender. Are you sure you're not trans? You sure? You sure?" Like they think that every day we're doing this, and I'm like, "Yo, we don't."
Is your kid off camera, by the way?
No, I'm talking to nobody. My 4-year-old is in bed. Thank God. She's been wearing me out all day. But we don't talk about it like that. We don't care. They don't care. They don't want to talk about it. They're like, I know. Why the hell do you keep bringing it up? That's insane. Like, and I'll be like, oh, well, especially with my 4-year-old, I'll be like, you do remember, why can I do that? She'd be like, because you were born a girl. I know, duh. And I'd be like, well, excuse me. Like, and she's like, yeah, but you're a boy now. So you can't do that. Your favorite color can't be pink because, and I'm just like, they think that as gay, as queer and trans people, that every day we wake up with like this banner and we play the fucking queer and trans national anthem and like indoctrinate our children. No, that's y'all Christian. Excuse me. Oh my God, who said that?
Mind you, I'm like here trying to like make dinner and get this kid ready for bed, and we're working on a fucking like MLK fucking like project in January, and I'm like, I don't have time to talk about being gay. I'm like, I just don't have the fucking time. Okay, we are over time. So before we go, and thank you all for sticking with me. I'm sorry to keep you. This is like the opposite of like colored people time. This is like gay time. Like, it just don't end. What can the LGBTQ plus community, because I would really like to focus on us. What can the LGBTQ plus community do to include, to amplify, to embrace trans men and trans masc folks, with the whole erasure of the T and the Q? I went to the protest at Stonewall the other day, and I wrote a piece on my Substack that I would love people to read if you haven't read it, where I was basically like reminding people that we cannot abandon trans people. But even those conversations, I think still people immediately think of trans women. So what can we do? And each of you can just jump in with.
I'm going to jump in because then I'm going to jump off. So I'm going to jump in and then I'm going to jump off. But I think that it all starts with education. I think that there is just such a lack of education about trans men, and I think people need to people need to want to educate themselves about trans men beyond wanting to hunch on us. Do not wait to educate yourself about trans men just because now you're curious about what kind of relationship or what the sex is going to be like or whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. I literally got into a back and forth discourse yesterday with a lesbian who was upset because it was on Miguel's video.
I saw it.
Because
Yeah,
there's
ridiculous.
too much emphasis on the T, and I'm like, well, they're literally erasing us. And yeah, but why? And I was like, you know what? Actually,
people are dying, right? Like just be locked in.
It was insane. And so there's also just the idea of not looking at trans people as a separate species. Trans men, we are part of the T of the LGBTQIA. We also can be a part of the LGBTQINA. Like, we are a part of the community, and we're intertwined in the community in so many different ways, and acting like we're not is absolutely insane. And there just needs to be less division of like, oh, well, y'all aren't oppressed, because a few people mentioned it. They think that because we're cis passing that we just get all this privilege, which again, there is privilege, but it's also the erasure, the isolation, and we part of the computer. I'm gay, I'm out here, I want to be part of the community. Involve me, I want to be there, and I should be there and not have to be, damn it, white and straight,
right,
and muscular. I'm gonna get there though. Give me a few months.
Right.
But yes, that's all I have to say about that. I do need to hop off now though. So
go ahead, Kaden.
Yes.
Kaden, before you do, we do have to remember that myth was put out there that we do get privilege, right? But that myth is put out there that we just blend in by the media. Media plays a huge role in so much, you know.
That is true.
And the femphobia that comes against, why would a man want to become a man? Why would a man want to become a woman? But okay, it makes sense that a woman would want to become a man, because then they gain privilege. That was all media.
Yes.
None of us created that. Trans women didn't create that. Trans men didn't create that. Non-binary did not create that narrative. That was all media.
Yeah, I didn't consider that, but also fuck that.
Right.
Like, at this point, we can understand so many things. It's time to unlearn all the bullshit. Like, stop. How long are y'all gonna be sheep and not learn for yourselves? Okay, I'm leaving. Good night.
All right, Black Kaden.
Thank you, Kaden.
My point I want to make, because I also have to go. And I don't know if this is targeted more. I don't know who I'm targeting with this one specifically, but one thing that I think I would really like to see. First of all, Kevin, big props to you for putting us all in this kind of spot. It's not often that I get to engage with a lot of other trans guys. Much less, sorry y'all, older than me. Because
we already clarified that.
Right,
we got it.
But one thing that I see a lot, and that I wish I would see less, is especially online, it's getting praised for being pretty, because we're pretty. At least in the spaces that I engage in, especially on TikTok, social media, it's like you see the fitness trans guys, you see the pretty ones that look like models and like pass super well, but it's never like, we're never really brought together to have conversations about something meaningful or our experiences, I feel like. And that goes back to like being fetishized. So it ends up being that we kind of create this, like, it's just more of the same. It's like, well, I'm gonna thirst trap because I'm a guy now, and like, look at my sick muscles that I got on my testosterone now. So it's only really given the spotlight for how we look and how well we've transitioned, rather than, well, what are you contributing to the world? And like, we got physicians and doctors and tech bros, and you're over here on PBS, which is like super impressive. But that's not often, I guess, what gets the most attention. So I think I would like that, right? Like, I probably wouldn't have come across your guys' profiles and assumed all of that, you know what I mean? Like, known about your history and your experience. And that's what makes it worth it for me as a younger guy, who's, you know, relatively early in his transition, to say, well, shit, maybe I do have something to look forward to that isn't just being hot or, you know, growing a beard eventually. But like, no, I get to actually have a life, and a successful one at that. So I think I'd just like to see more community. Also, what we were saying about isolation, it's honestly, hook me up with any other trans guys that you do have, and not in a way of like, oh, you're both trans, I think you're going to be best friends because look, you have that in common. But like, how do I get into tech? Now I know that there's somebody that I can ask. Or how do I get my own PBS show? Now there's somebody that I know that already has the their foot in the door.
And won a Webby Award.
Okay, go ahead, Webby. But it's cool stuff like that where just having access to other trans dudes who are killing it and can at least motivate or point you in the right direction. Everybody nods.
I'm waiting for someone else to jump in. What do you folks want to see from the community? I just want to say thank you. Sorry, thank you, Miguel, for acknowledging that. I just want to say I think that this is.
I love these.
I love that this is what I can do. Like what I can do as someone who is now like breaking into media and journalism is make sure to highlight the stories that I'm seeing no one else is highlighting. That's because sometimes it does feel kind of fucking powerless to just every fucking day reading like the HRC fatal violence against trans people list. Like it's bookmarked in my phone at this point. So yeah, and I'm happy to have you all here.
And honestly, thank you so much. I really feel like you are the one person that does always cover everything that a lot of exactly like you're saying. We see that, I very much see that and appreciate, and I've recognized you as that person for a long time doing that. So thank you, because a lot of news pages are not doing it. So thank you.
There's exactly what we need to do right there. We need our own media. We need our own represent. It's unfortunate that the government and private companies are rolling back DE&I, because really that is and was our only foot in the door. It doesn't matter how qualified we were getting denied left and right. Whatever part of your identity was marginalized was probably the one thing that was keeping you out of wherever it was that you wanted to work.
Right.
DEI was getting you in. And to be honest, that's maybe one of the most significant things that we really need right now, and unfortunately aren't getting. It's not just that DE&I is reading up about us, but it's also hiring us in tech, in media, PBS, schools, wherever. Literally, so we could get in healthcare. Before I forget, I'm sorry, in all of these fields, because it's important to have these voices everywhere.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons. And Kevin, you're an example of that. And I can attest to that. I see, even sometimes I see you post things I haven't even seen on them or Teen Vogue yet. And I'm like, yo, come on, what are y'all doing? And I know there's a gazillion trans people working there, and I know there's a gazillion queer people working there.
I also want to say, I really love what you are doing, Devin Durrell, which is posting stories at the end of the week that are not doom and gloom. And also I don't want people to expect trans people or trans max folks to only post about trans stories. I want to hear trans people talk about anything. We
have a lot to say, so I hope that becomes a thing. Go check out everyone else. I love EC's posts, actually, whether it just be about what he's doing or tech related in general. So I have two other people to look forward to now.
Yeah. So EC and Charlie, before we go, what do you folks want to see?
You want me to go first, Charlie?
Go for it.
Okay. I'd like to see more intentionality within the community, realizing that we can break a lot of these, as Miguel said, a lot of these stereotypes, a lot of these things. And if we really want to be different, we can be different. If we're going to be different, let's do the thing. Let's not half-ass it. Let's not halfway do it. Let's go all the way there and be the thing. Yeah, because it's so nuanced, and I think we're holding our own selves back. And I personally believe that trans men and trans masculine individuals are honestly the Trojan horse to unlock everything that they say about gender and sex and sexual orientation and reproductive justice. And that's why they don't want to admit that we exist.
Charlie?
So I suppose my biggest thing is just whatever sphere people have, if it's an option for you to stress like hiring trans people, then that's what you need to do. If it's an option for you to use whatever experience you have to go testify at the Capitol, that's what you need to do. And we don't just need trans people doing that. Like if you're involved in medical organizations, we need you to fight for trans inclusivity in them, because the two of us out of like 2,000 people in the room cannot do it all. And like also fight for all the other things that we want to fight for. Like we need help. So I just want people to show up more and like act. And especially it's meant so much for me, like when my classmates who are queer, some of them aren't even queer, just like show up to testify, to tell the government that they're making decisions and laws based off of medical misinformation. That's very nice to see. And if everyone felt more responsibility to do a little bit of things like that, then we could make huge strides. So truly, I just need more people to act on these things and to help us get this work done.
All right. Well, thank you, all of you, for joining me for this conversation. It's an hour and 2 minutes, so I'm so sorry. It's a Monday night, and I promised this would be 30 minutes, but I really appreciate your time. I will put everyone's Instagrams and all the things in the description of this YouTube video. And before you guys go, whoever is watching this, whoever is seeing this, thank you for watching. Please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I will be back next week. Okay, take care. Love you. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, Kevin.